Okay. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone got a good cup of coffee. So we've talked a lot about some of the use cases, the promises that AI holds in the financial industry. But now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. A lot of us are wondering, what does this look like in practice, and how can we get it into some of our businesses? Do we build or do we buy? And if there's one thing I've learned from our panelists is that it's not a binary, that it's actually more of a spectrum. So let's dive in with Joanne here, who comes from MasterCard. We also have Jeff McMillan from Morgan Stanley. And then we'll have, on the software and hardware side, Malcolm DeMaio from NVIDIA. But Joanne, I want to start with you because you have some strong feelings about how we should be thinking about building versus buying. Now, kind of take us through some of the considerations you're looking at that are unique to the banking industry when thinking about this question.
Well, I guess my strong feelings come from just kind of MasterCard's position in the financial services ecosystem, right? We operate an ecosystem ourselves, right? So we're always partnering. And so when I was asked, this very binary question, I was like, well, it's both, right? I mean, we're going to build, we're going to buy, we're going to partner, and we're so that it's everything in between. And I've been saying ever since kind of all generative AI and even predictive AI, it's very much a team sport. You need lots of different capabilities, you need lots of different capacities. And while we've been leading on kind of predictive AI for fraud and for cybersecurity for a very long time. And obviously, we're going to layer on generative AI to those capabilities. In order to really take advantage of this moment, we are partnering with lots of different firms for the capacity that we need. NVIDIA is one of them. They're sitting next to me. Scale AI is in the audience. We're considering other tools. I've seen other folks today that I've been talking with and my firm is talking with. And so, I think it is not an either-or question, so hence my passion, right? And then when you really think about it, in order for us to be successful as a firm, it's always been about our customers, our constituents, whether it be the banks, whether it be our cardholders, of course, but also our merchants, as well as governments and other agencies that we partner with. In order for us to make payments safe, simple, and secure, which is really what we always have been about as our mandate, we've always had to work with governments and partners around the world, especially as it relates to security. And security now the game is just going up and up and up on the things that we have to worry about. And so, yes, my passion for this question and my passionate response really does generate from there, in that I think the answers and the capacity for us to learn, and you've heard all day, for the amount of change that we're going to really undergo in the next 18 to 24 months, there's no way that any one firm can go it alone. And so I think you've heard today that the solutions will be to build some things where you're strong in your own data sets and in the products and solutions that you have a competitive advantage, but that there are going to be so many other things that you're going to have to leverage other firms' knowledge and go from there in partnerships that really make sense.
Jeff, Morgan Stanley is actually an OpenAI customer, and you guys have been vocal about incorporating generative AI in an AI chatbot for your financial advisors, for example. Where do you bring in kind of the partner versus decide to build something on your own? Clearly, you have a partner in some ways, but what are some other aspects of the business that perhaps still have some opportunity to go either way?
Well, I think, first of all, you're not going to build these things yourself, at least not this year.
Large language models?
Yeah, you're not building your large language model. And I would say we are huge partners we're actually the only financial services firm in the world that has a direct partnership with their research team. And that's almost 2 years now. So our decision was based, when I made it, like, why'd you go with OpenAI? Because 2 years ago, that was the only firm in the world that had an offering in this space. So there we are. Now, I think as you think going forward, obviously the events of weekend ago made people pause on the risks of single vendor concentration. So I think that's a very real issue.
Did that make you pause?
No, because there's no way that OpenAI was going to disappear, in my view, and it happened so quickly, and No, and the other reason I'll say, we went from like driving horse-drawn carriages around the streets of New York City, and then someone gave me a BMW. Now, lots of people coming along and telling me, no, you could drive a Porsche, or you could drive this. Out of the box, there is so much value that you can create. And by the way, and we don't work with Google, but I will tell you, I've seen the Llama stuff, it's fantastic. What AWS is doing, brilliant. You can work with any of the major providers, and as long as you get your legal compliance and risk stuff together, you can change the world with what's in place right now. And there's all this talk about fine-tuning and how should I build my ecosystem. In 2023, November, my focus is getting as much value out of this tool set that I have right now. And will I have multiple LLMs someday? Probably. Do I partner with some of these folks in this room? Absolutely. But in a world in which there really are no experts, let's be clear, the best thing that we have found is get the smartest people you have in the room, engage with these tools in a controlled playground, and invent. And we just did our hackathon a couple months ago. We had 450 teams that built stuff. And we're now in prod with 2 solutions, and probably by the first quarter of next year, we'll probably have 25.
Malcolm, let's get you in here because NVIDIA's been the poster child for this artificial intelligence revolution, and a lot of us are familiar with the AI chips, the processing chips that really bring a lot of this technology to life, but you also have a software business and you focus on the financial services side. Talk to us a little bit about the actual products that you're out there, putting out to people or to companies like Morgan Stanley and MasterCard that compete with OpenAI in some ways.
Well, Jackie, first and foremost, thanks for the question, and it's great to be here. So NVIDIA, I'm so happy that you actually acknowledged we're in other businesses than the chips, because most people think that's all we do. We are working really hard, first and foremost, to make sure that accelerated compute's available everywhere. We actually don't sell anything direct. So we work through the cloud providers and we work through the server vendors, and ecosystem is our first thought every morning. So thinking about who can we help that's doing anything serious in AI to do it better, more efficiently and less costly is where we're focused. So in financial services, we are trying to focus in on a few use cases. And when we think about ecosystem and in lighthouse partnerships, we're really interested in those really tough problems. So transaction fraud is a really tough problem. So we're very interested in how can we help a network leverage ensembles of AI. We're not going to sell this. We're just going to help them build it and use the accelerated compute platform to do it more efficiently, to do it drawing less power, because sustainability is a real challenge today, and data centers are drawing 2 to 3% of the world's energy and are on track for that to double. With accelerated compute, we really we give you a fighting chance to get to attack your carbon footprint. So at the end of the day, we're focusing on a few use cases. We're looking for those deep engagements directly with customers, but they're going to gain access to the technology we build through our partners.
What kind of demand are you seeing from the banking industry in relation to perhaps some other sectors out there?
So the biggest push is in trading. Trading is very much a big consumer of our accelerated compute platform. Some of it is just old-fashioned high performance compute using pre-AI models, but there's a lot of experimentation there. We're working very closely with banks. What we've announced in the last month at Oracle has gone live in Oracle Cloud with our DGX Cloud. At Microsoft Ignite, we announced the AI Foundation or Foundry, which is also based on DGX Cloud, and then creating a set of software libraries and frameworks to help customers build AI. And just yesterday or the day before, we announced at AWS re:Invent some pretty cool stuff, building a supercomputer together with our Grace Hopper architecture, which is an ARM chip in our most powerful GPU platform. We also announced on our earnings call the next generation GPU, and we also announced a new library, both that are accelerating inference by 2x each. So we just made inference 4x less costly, anywhere you want to do it. So really the focus is staying in our swim lane. We're not the last mile application builder, and just helping by building these capabilities so that customers don't have to.
So Jeff and Joanne, you guys are proponents of this off-the-shelf, let's buy it, it's boxed up kind of approach in some aspects. But what are the trade-offs of that when other companies out there can get the same off-the-shelf product? How do you think about that trade-off perhaps in having a competitive advantage in a product that other people have?
I'll go. So I'm just telling you what I did to date, because that was the most reasonable thing that we thought we could do given where we are and the tools that were available to us. We will absolutely use solutions. I mean, go talk to these small companies like Microsoft and Salesforce. Guess what they're doing? They're building generative AI into their solutions. I mean, go play with the Copilot solution. It's pretty good. So we're going to live in a world in which these generative AI solutions are going to be built into everything that we do. And if it's a point solution that's scalable, that doesn't necessarily need to leverage a lot of your internal intellectual capital, then you should absolutely buy that thing. But I will say one other thing that is a bigger consideration that I don't think people are talking about is that I believe in 10 years, we are all going to live in a world where AI is here and we're here and everything else is down here. So think about a world where our financial advisors have 300 applications. I fundamentally believe they're going to talk to those applications, not through a mega menu where they highlight and they click and they hover. They're just going to ask a question that's going to retrieve information. Now, if you're going to do that, now you have to start to link up your infrastructure. You have to think about common taxonomies and structures. So I think the truth is we will live in both, but we have to be very thoughtful about, any of us can build a little thing today, right? But the question is, how do we build an ecosystem where generative AI is able to know and connect to all of your applications such that then you can bring all that information together to make better choices? And I think that's a big idea that is going to require a lot of integration, both with internal solutions and external solutions. And we're working with OpenAI on this right now. And the truth is, the code has not been cracked on this problem yet.
Joanne, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think this is the crux. Somebody said it, I think it was on the last panel or panel before, sorry, things are blurring at this point today, about working from the middle out, right? And I think that that's really what Jeff is talking about and what we all are now really trying to get to. There's one set of solutioning that we can use the tools that are out there. And then there's our data set and building your own, a la Bloomberg, right? There's small models that we can build on our own, right? And there's also predictive AI that we have built on our own. But the linkage and how we're going to do that and the curation moment is really upon us. And I think that there are tools actually out there that will do some of the build around regulation and compliance, right? And that will help us build that commonality that I think many of us are going to be seeking. But where the secret sauce is between what is unique to you and what you're building toward for that differentiated product set, right? So I think a lot of us our use cases are on the defensive moment. A lot of the previous conversation has talked about using it for coding, for creativity, for marketing campaigns, et cetera. But I think we're going to see that middle layer as that gets built out. That's where the transformation is going to happen. And I think everybody's working toward that. But I think that's going to be the transformation in like 18 months is how do you get there so that then it is a complete stack between that user interface and actually getting all the way through the power of all of these layers. So I do think of it as a layer cake that's getting built right now, and it's going to take some consistency within a community of builders to get us there. So
Thank you for bringing in the cake analogy. I feel like we haven't had any other good ones today.
Sorry.
Malcolm, I'm curious about what conversations you're having when you're going out there to pitch to banks and other financial institutions to incorporate some of these products into their businesses. Joanne and Jeff mentioned security, but what else is there out there that kind of presents itself almost as a hurdle before they kind of bring some of these tools in-house?
So a lot of the companies that we're talking to, frankly, just don't have the infrastructure today to really do a good job of working with generative AI. So their only option really is to consume in cloud. So we're making the technology available in cloud. The other challenge they have is, in many cases, their data centers aren't outfitted for this technology. So we're working with colos to make sure that they have that as an option as well if they want to bring something, if they don't want to move something to cloud for some reason. So, but at the end of the day, we build supercomputers. We do it every day. If a customer wants to build a supercomputer on-prem, we'll do it for them. And we'll work closely with the clouds to help them create an architecture in the cloud that works for them if they don't want to use our DGX cloud. But when you think, Jackie, about DGX cloud, it's basically our reference architecture, and it's available. It's what Meta uses. Essentially, it's what anybody who's doing anything serious in AI is using today to build models. It's now available in cloud for, $20,000, $30,000 a month. So to any size company.
Do you have a preference when you go out and pitch to potential clients, whether they kind of bring you in for one aspect of something, or do you prefer to kind of take a bigger piece of that pie? Is it more onerous then to kind of customize it to that particular client versus just to say, here, this is what we have off the shelf? I guess the question being, which is more lucrative for NVIDIA?
So I think at the end of the day, we'd love for customers to use the reference architecture we built. We think it's the best. When you benchmark against everything else, it is the best. That said, everybody likes to build their own thing. And so we support whatever, we work very closely with the OEMs, the server vendors, and they've built reference architectures around our technology that they can provide on premise. The clouds have their own reference architecture in addition to our DGX cloud. So there's a really, however a customer wants to address this. We don't think about it in terms of what's more lucrative for us. We tend to think about, I'm not suggesting that we're altruistic, but what I am saying is that we think about what's the problem we're solving. Is it a deep and serious problem that everybody has? And should we build something specifically to solve that problem that'll benefit the rest of the industry?
Jeff, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the progress you've seen with the AI chatbot you guys have incorporated into the wealth management part of the business?
Yeah, so we launched in full production to our 30,000 internal employees in September after 9 months of a beta, and essentially the concept is traditional search is quite poor, right? If you're a financial advisor and your client says, hey, what are our views on NVIDIA and Apple and Microsoft, and what are the risks of all of them, and can you compare and contrast their next 12 months forecasted revenue, that's a 45-minute journey. And we saw, in a world in which our advisors are still at the center of the relationship, and in a world in which we can try to make them as smart as the smartest person in the organization, who doesn't want to have access to a tool that answers everything that Morgan Stanley knows. So it's a private instance of OpenAI. It has 100,000 documents that we have curated. And by the way, we have spent an enormous, the hard part was not getting the LLM model to work. The hardest part was getting 100,000 documents to be high quality, because AI is stupid when you give it bad content, right? And there's nothing, nothing solves that without high quality information. And I would argue our greatest achievement is the quality of the inputs, and we can talk about that for days. But understanding that that's true, we now have deployed a solution, and it's changed the nature of conversations, because what advisors are doing now is someone says, I was in Chicago recently, and someone said, hey, my mom was just diagnosed with early stage dementia. And forevermore, we would have say, hey, I'm really sorry. But the financial advisor said, what do I say to a client whose mother has Alzheimer's? And guess what? We have rich content. Elder care, different types of support situations, self-care for caregivers, the economics, right? And she's like, my God, I'm brilliant. And that's the world I want to live in. And that's the first thing that we've deployed. Usage is up 2x versus the old tools. And by the way, accuracy is higher. It's higher than the historical channels.
Well, part of the challenge, I imagine, I think broadly when consumers are using this, let alone when a business is do you trust the information that's coming out? Did you see any pushback or any feedback from your financial advisors actually using the tool?
So 2 points. Number one, we piloted for 9 months. We had 20,000, and I'm not using hyperbole, 20,000 pieces of feedback, because the day we went live with this thing, it was not producing high quality. Like, go ahead, plug it into your data set. It will give you an answer. It may not be the answer that you want. So number one, you have to curate a lot of it. And the second thing is you have to be transparent. And I think if you start looking at some of the new large language models, they're already doing this, but if you ask that question about what our view on NVIDIA is, it gives you an answer. It gives you the link to the underlying research, and it actually brings the snippet, the 700-word phrases that it pulled from the NVIDIA report. So you can't live in a world in which you don't have transparency. And I think a combination of all the training we did, the quality of the inputs, and then the transparency that we give to what we deliver gives people a high degree. And like I said, I will put my bot against anybody in this room in terms of its ability to retrieve and digest information.
Is that a tool that you foresee ever implementing at MasterCard?
So we're doing it on a smaller basis, but I think some of the points Jeff is making is really important for kind of this whole notion of the collaboration, right? So I'm going to double down on some of the things that Jeff is talking about just to kind of draw them out. And Jeff, please chime in because you just lived that journey. So we're doing it on a smaller basis on some of our client-facing tools, right? So we have Spending Pulse, we have other kind of client-facing products and solutions where we are adding in and we're testing, so they're not in production yet, but we're testing kind of information that we provide our customers. And so we have a customer feedback loop going on. And so, but you can imagine if your data is not curated, right? It's really Jeff's point of why he got 20,000 responses. If your data is not highly curated that you're putting in, and you don't know where it's coming from, and you haven't figured that out, and that really is the moment that many, many organizations, and I'm sure NVIDIA can chat about this, no matter how good your tool is, if the data isn't highly curated, of good quality, of consistency, accuracy, completeness, timeliness, all of these factors, right? On top of the curation, meaning that what's going in, you can figure out what is being done on the output, and then what's the impact on the outcome of the use case that you are creating. It's going to be a hot mess. And so we're doing it in very, very specific lanes so that we can test before we combine it into customer-facing products. So we have different customers testing different slices of those outputs right now so that we can curate back all of the kind of feedback that Jeff is talking about. We don't have advisors, right? So we deploy through other organizations. So a lot of our products and solutions are not individual facing, they're business facing. So they're going to layer on additional insights. So we have to be very, very careful in what we are actually producing and what's going to be layered on in an ecosystem type of process.
Let's see, does the audience, anyone have any questions here that we can address now? Matt?
Hey, Matt Glickman from Snowflake. I guess question to Jeff, but I want to hear you guys as well. So a question about, and I think it's great that you've actually taken the plunge and gone into production. I think you learn a lot, like you said, going there. Curious about, in addition to kind of curating data, one of the things that we've been thinking a lot about hearing is about having a semantic that explains the data for the AI to use instead of having to try to guess it itself. So I'm curious about the kind of the role in a semantic input into these models so that it can basically going to be more performant?
It's really, what I would say is that, AI is like us, right? The more information you give the models, the better they do. So if you throw a random 1,000 documents or 100,000 documents from a bunch of different companies, it will do very poorly.
Right.
If you take a random from the same company, it will do slightly better. If you take, for example, our research, we produce 60,000 research reports a year. Every single one of those equity research reports has a bull, bear, and a base case. And the price target is up on the right-hand corner, and the rating is there, and I can go to town. I never get it wrong. If you give me something that's not structured and doesn't have the right tagging, it gets worse. So the answer is that it depends, but in certain cases like research, it was massively helpful that we had data structures. We also have a taxonomy. I have 3 taxonomists on my team, and they build that. And what that helps us do is you start to prompt engineer. And I don't know how close people are to this, but the way prompt engineering works is you do all that work, and then you see what comes out, and then it's wrong. And then you say, well, why did it get it wrong? And then sometimes the metadata can help you get it closer to right. Sometimes you have to add metadata, and then in what we've been doing more recently is we've been using OpenAI to help reverse engineer and classify the content, which has added even more value.
Jeff and Joanne, could you expand on who's doing this fine-tuning and tweaking? Are you, is that part of the service that OpenAI provides, or have you had to hire? And if so, what does building out that team look like going forward if you're going to have these tools be a bigger part of the process going forward?
You can go first if you'd like.
No, go ahead. I'll chime in. It's a team sport, so
Okay.
it's lots of different skill sets in this one.
So first of all your PhDs are not the right people to do
Correct.
this.
That's right. It's not.
And one of my PhDs is in the back there, so sorry, Shrikar. But I joke, my best prompt engineers are under the age of 25, and most of them have liberal arts degrees. Because do this. Go into GPT, right, over the weekend, pay the $20 to get the high end. I'm not here to sell you OpenAI, I don't really care. And I created, over the weekend, a bot that takes all of my emails that I wrote over the last 3 years to my team during and after COVID, and it's Ask Jeff McMillan. And I just kept writing more words when I didn't like what it did. And after 25 minutes, I was done. So if you know how to write, and if you know how to communicate, and if you know the problem you are solving for, you too can be a prompt engineer. And the value is not in the engineering skills. Honestly, they're not going to matter so much anymore for a large percentage of us. They will still matter to some extent. The ability to communicate effectively to a machine and have it do, because guess what? It does exactly what you tell it to do, which sometimes is not what you want it to do. And to go back and do that 20 times and to figure out how to make it work is a brand new skill set that none of us are actually qualified for, which means in that world, get your smart 25-year-olds with liberal arts degrees from Providence College and get them at it. And they'll figure it out, because I've done this. They will figure it out, and they are so far ahead of where I am in this problem.
How expensive are some of these prompt engineers? I'm curious, because we saw news reports a few months ago at the height of the ChatGPT craze that Netflix was hiring a prompt engineer for $900,000 a year. How much are they costing you?
Go ahead, you go first.
First of all, not that. I wasn't going to go after prompt engineering, so go ahead and answer the question, Jeff. I'm going to go after different
First of all, I'm not going to divulge my compensation structure. But the thing is, I'm not hiring prompt engineers.
Right.
Because there's none out there to buy. And by the way, the guy that's good for the guy that got 900, God bless him. But I am teaching my employee base how to be prompt engineers.
Right. That's what.
And they don't make 900.
No, he's creating them. So what he's doing is he's actually saying these are the skills to actually do prompt engineering well. But there are other skills that are needed, right? So you need people who understand data quality. So data quality is also a sport that you can't completely teach because it requires people who understand your data sets and the use therein and the data and where the data is coming from. You need people who are going to help you with security and data provenance, meaning they understand the sources of your data and where it's coming from. So this is kind of where technology and data meets. And so you want to talk about where your security problems are going to come in. And we talk about watermarking, but watermarking isn't really there yet. So how we share information, how we receive information, all of that's going to become increasingly important so that when Morgan Stanley gets a file from MasterCard, they can actually validate it is truly from MasterCard and not from a third actor. So there are skills like that. Semantic modeling, well, we need knowledge graphs, right, that actually show the relationship between the types of labeling that actually matter for the curation of the data. These are all data management, actually, types of skill sets that are not taught to the data scientist PhDs. They kind of get a class or two about them, but they don't really care about it. They want to go after the analytics. So you need to look for other types of skill sets. And yes, I think the prompt engineering question, it's for a moment in time. I also think that we're going to get better and better at understanding the tool. And this is actually a skill set that almost every employee is going to need. This is that upskilling moment that we keep talking about, that Manuela talked about, that others talked about today, about how do you actually incorporate it into everybody's job. That prompt engineering of how do I ask the right question to get the right result, I think we all have to get better and better at.
Malcolm, when you go into some of these pitch meetings, do you find that executives and even the deputies under them kind of understand what technology they're asking for, they're being presented, or is there still a learning curve that needs to be overcome at this point?
I think so. Right after a year ago, right after the release of ChatGPT, something sort of very interesting happened. The people who came to visit us in our briefing center changed from data scientists to executives. And in fact, if you look at the top of the list of the index, those companies have been out to see us many times this year. And are working with us deeply to understand how to leverage the technology, because accelerated compute's different. It's new, it's different, and you need the skill sets in order to use it efficiently, even if you're using it in cloud. So to answer your question, yeah, I think for the most part, yes, it's gotten a lot better, but there's still a gap, and the bigger gap that is getting bigger is companies that are on their front foot and companies that are kind of waiting and seeing.
Any other questions? Oh, here we go. We have two in the front.
Yeah, I have a question for Malcolm. I think you stated earlier that most everyone can get access to NVIDIA solutions via cloud service providers. What added value does NVIDIA, does a relationship directly with you at NVIDIA provide to enterprise firms, financial firms?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. So when Bloomberg built GPT, our solutions architects were involved. Why? Because we've built a lot of tooling, we've trained models, we've experienced a lot of the barriers and challenges that you're going to run up against even if you're just prompt engineering all the way up through fine tuning. Basically, and by the way, fine tuning and RAG is how you get the highest accuracy, and using larger models is how you get more accuracy, and using higher quality data is how you improve accuracy, and that's kind of important in our industry. So, but from a cloud perspective, they're our biggest customers, they're our best partners. There's a little tension. They do like their own home cooking, but at the end of the day, I think we bring a lot of knowledge in this space that is very helpful to customers. Plus, we really don't have an agenda in terms of where they run this.
We have two more questions in the front.
So one thing that's come across in a lot of the panels is the importance of curiosity and the skill set being one of continuous learning, having critical thinking skills, being able to write and ask the right prompt questions. And yet, in the media today, you read everything about humanities programs being shut down across schools, kids today focusing on going to trade schools, boot camps, becoming engineers. And so I think there's a real disconnect between what I'm hearing everyone here say they're looking for to hire and where the market is headed in terms of where students think they need to go to get the degrees and the education that they need. And so I'm just curious if anyone has had those sort of broader conversations to get the word out that actually being able to write is, critical thinking and continuous learning is important, and because there's a real disconnect right now.
Joanne, you have a unique perspective on this. You're a professor.
Yeah. I think that the problem is that we want it to be either or. Like, go and I get this question all the time, right? What should my child major in? It's like, okay, I don't know your child. I cannot answer the question. And it's not a fair one to begin with, right? So I think the answer is this. I think that, the reality is that this is a technology that is going to be applied, right? And it's going to be applied in medicine. It's going to be applied in finance. It's going to be applied in entertainment, in all sorts of ways that I can't even predict standing here in November of 2023. And so we need all sorts of skill sets, right? I think what happens is that, so should my child have a degree in philosophy or humanities or English? I can't answer that because I can't look at a curriculum. But what I say is this: they should be able to apply, right, the new technologies to a degree in humanities, if that's what they're interested in, right? What I mostly say is make sure your child is wildly interested in whatever they're majoring in, but that they should run to the new tooling kit, right? Not be afraid, right? So if they're hiding in a theater major that's afraid of technology, that's a problem. But if they're a theater major that is going to be behind the scenes using all of the latest technology, well, then go for it, right? So that's where the roads have to meet and intersect. And I think that's what we have to tell our kids. And I think kids are doing it. I mean, at least my nieces and nephews are running toward the technology, and I think we have to encourage that. But I don't think anybody is saying that critical thinking isn't necessary, that you don't need to be able to read and write and have basic mathematical and science skills. I think all of that's going to be necessary into the future.
Go for it.
Jeff, it seems like you have a secret sauce of sorts in terms of 2x usage of the new tools versus the prior ones, hiring prompt engineers with liberal arts degrees under the age of 25, having such clean input and data. And so when you add it all together...
Be careful, Jeff. You're going to get a lot of resumes.
So, no, I mean, the wealth management pre-tax margin has improved quite significantly. But how much does this translate to revenues and expenses or pre-tax margin or any financial metric that you can give us?
Wow. My head of corporate communications is in the back row. He's staring at me right now. So the answer is I don't know. I don't know. And I will say a couple things on that. Number one, when our first problem that we tried to solve, we intentionally did not put economic KPIs against it. And the reason we did not is because the most valuable thing that I thought we could do with this initiative was learn. And even if it had failed and didn't deliver any of the value that I've described, I would have just said it was a massive success because we'd have learned the 50 things that you don't do. I think, that being said, I think that people that are spending lots of money on technology are going to be able to save a lot of money in their design and build. It's unquestionable. I think process and process reengineering using these tools is going to be meaningful. And I think the jury's out on revenue because I think you have to rethink about your business model and how you service your clients. And I think that's a longer poll, but I think there's meaningful savings for all of our businesses using these tools. And I think it's not hyperbole. I think it's real.
Okay, just one follow-up then, and maybe an adjective in this case. You gave the analogy of going around Central Park in a horse-drawn carriage. Now you're driving a BMW. And so to some degree, don't you have to measure it to manage it, as other presenters have said today? And so how much more should you guys be putting into AI investments? A little bit, a lot, as much as possible? Because if you're getting such big learning and returns, how much more should you put in? That's a budgeting decision.
It is, and again, not here to share my internal budgeting process, but Morgan Stanley spends a lot of money on technology. And instead of saying investing in AI, I think that's the wrong question. The question is, where do we want to invest for our business to support our clients and our financial advisors in 2024? That's the first question. And the second question is, what tools that are now available to me that weren't available 2 years ago in the generative AI space that I'm going to reallocate historical investment towards those things? So for me to say I'm going to triple my tech budget is not really the way to think about it. I'm going to use the money I probably would have spent on the other problem and doing it in the old way. I'm going to do it in the new way. And I'm going to get more value. It's going to be faster. And I'm going to create more scale. And yeah. And don't get me wrong, we measure. I'm just not here to share you my metrics. Sorry.
You have another one.
Yeah, so Andreas here. I have a question on that topic on collaboration, and we talked about use cases that make sense to collaborate because with that with that partner you're faster. But you also said there are cases where it's about the differentiation, where you say you want to have those cases yourself, you want to develop those. Still, at that point, you need to decide if you go with a partner where you potentially are faster because NVIDIA and Microsoft, and so we heard those partners bring experience that you don't have and you're faster. Or you do it yourself because you say that is actually what I want to keep. So you have that question of either sacrificing speed for keeping data and expertise proprietary, or you really build that yourself. How you decide on that question? Do you go for speed or do you want to develop those yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's depends on the use case, right? It depends on where is it connected to the business outcome, right? And I think you have to then weigh those outcomes against what the business goal is. I think Jeff said it a minute ago. You know, I've been asked by clients and customers, you know, how do I create my AI strategy? And I'm like, well, what's your business strategy, right? And where does AI play a role? I think the question on build versus buy versus partner, right, is all related to, well, how fast do you need to go? Is it a problem of disintermediation? Is it a problem of just organizational efficiency? Or is it truly that you have something new and exciting that is proprietary, and can you take a little bit longer to get it right, right? And then what are the negative potential impacts? I mean, some speakers have mentioned this today. The negative impacts if you rush to market and you get it wrong, right? These are all the considerations. I think that every firm, we're all on a learning journey right now to try to make those decisions. And I think those are the weights. And then by waiting, are you somehow, you know, not getting to market? Are you not getting the learnings, both positive and negative, that your firm needs, including the training moment? And the trainings go all the way from the board all the way down to your employees.
Can I just add one thing? My best advice is just do something.
Yeah, exactly. Do it.
Don't stress.
Don't wait.
Because, by the way, everything that we're talking about is going to change in 6 months. Right? Everything we're going to be like, oh, that's what you do. And no, 6 months can all change. So the best thing you can do is get smart people in the room. And whether it's on this platform or that platform, honestly, they're all BMWs. Just do.
Right, you wait too long, the whole world's going to change anyway.
I would say that I agree with everything you've said. But if you go back 3 months and you go back 6 months, different techniques were the rage. This is going to be the way to do things. Those techniques that were the rage 6 months ago are still being used. So you need the ability, you need to build the capabilities in this business to be able to use prompt engineering, to be able to use parameter efficient fine-tuning, to be able to use fine-tuning, be able to use RAG, because at some point you may have a use, unless you're convinced you're never going to need it, then you don't. But that's what we're building. That's what we've built. We've built a data curation capability, and we're continuously adding filters to it to simplify this effort. And we've built guardrails to protect you from hallucinations, et cetera. So the point is, what problem are you solving? What sets of problems are you going to be solving down the road? And how do you create the right standard set of tools so that you're not constantly plugging things into your stack?
And what I will say is this: document those decisions that you're making today based on what's known today, because what will change tomorrow, we don't know. Because then when you make the switch tomorrow to the next technology or next toolkit that's available, what will be needed is, with all the regulation that's pending, they will want to know when they come examine you, and they will, why you made that decision back then when something new is available when they're examining you. So document your decisions today.
Joanne, I'm curious. Jeff said that he wasn't too concerned about the OpenAI drama, and he's a customer of OpenAI. But curious if that would have concerned you. You look at vendors broadly. Did that, I don't know, give you some pause?
I actually looked at it more just as a lawyer from the board governance angle. We found it really interesting how that board was originally created, and from kind of that fiduciary responsibility that those directors were originally given, their mandate to define general AI intelligence, artificial intelligence. I think it was a board that was misaligned with the company that they were actually governing. And I think that actually creates a real tension. I don't know, I obviously wasn't in the room when it was happening, as the song from Hamilton goes, but I do think that tension is really fascinating when you look at the governance responsibility for companies. Make sure your board is involved, make sure that your executives are aware of what's being done, and that your directors, somebody earlier said that the directors need to up their game. If they aren't the right ones, then make sure they have the right advisory council or folks to make sure they understand what a firm is doing, because clearly that disconnect was significant. And so it doesn't give me pause in the underlying technology, but certainly gives me a pause from kind of that governance lens and risk management lens, that you want your board members to be kind of engaged on both the commercial opportunity as well as the risk piece.
I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you all.
Thank you.